Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I was sitting across from my lawyer, and there were divorce papers between us. Just 2 days ago, my world turned upside down when I was handed these papers. The feeling was surreal, like a scene from a movie. My lawyer shook her head, disbelief written on her face as she scanned the documents. "When did you first find out about this?" she asked, curiosity and concern mixed in her voice. I took a deep breath, remembering the day before I received the documents. "You didn't know?" she asked. "No," I replied, still struggling with the memories. I entered the apartment. There was tension in the air. She invited me to the table, and before I even had time to take off my coat, she fired a bomb. She wants a divorce. "And then what happened?" my lawyer asked, bending down to get the details. I paused, memories whirling through my head. "It's nothing," I finally said, feeling disappointment creep into my soul. She just got up to leave. I was stunned and called out to her, asking why she thought she could just dump it on me and leave. "And what did she say?" Silence. Just as I was about to put pressure on her, I noticed a figure lurking in the kitchen doorway, a man in a formal suit. Did he say something? He didn't say a word to me. He just looked at her and asked, "Are you ready, honey?" She nodded, and then he grabbed her suitcase. They went out together, leaving me in a daze of shock and disbelief. "What's next?" my lawyer asked again, her eyes wide with anticipation. I could only shake my head, realizing that reality was sinking deeper and deeper. And then, nothing. Only the echo of the door closing behind them. He parked his elegant German car right in front of our door, the kind that attracts glances and attracts attention. Not that I cared much about luxury cars, but I could tell by the way it sparkled in the sunlight that it was expensive. She nodded knowingly, as if it were a well-rehearsed script, and her fingers absently flipped through the legal papers spread out in front of us. And what happened next? It's nothing. She walked out the door with him, leaving me in a whirlwind of confusion. When I finally managed to collect my thoughts, I looked around the apartment. It seemed terribly empty. Her clothes, jewelry, cosmetics, everything is gone. Meanwhile, she continued to shake her head, making a gesture of disbelief. Divorce applications like this are not that common. She referred to the prenuptial agreement, which, in fact, meant a confession of infidelity. All she wanted was to get back what she had brought into the marriage. The papers mentioned a trust that belonged to her by right. She insisted on keeping the car, which she said she bought herself. In the meantime, I had to keep my retirement account and the meager savings we had left. I couldn't help but snort at the absurdity of it all. My lawyer looked up from the documents, intrigued. "Enlighten me," he asked. "We were married for 4 years, graduated from college 5 years ago, and I got a modest job as a teacher. My retirement account was barely a blip on the radar, and our savings paled in comparison to her trust." "How big is her trust?" he asked, feeling a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "Several million, I suppose," my lawyer replied casually, "although you've never seen him." I paused, searching for words to express the bewilderment bubbling in my mind. Explaining my upbringing has never been difficult in terms of clarity, but it has often left people confused. My father was a big businessman, but he and my mother firmly believed that wealth should not be flaunted. For them, sincere connections came first, not an extravagant display of wealth. My childhood was certainly comfortable, but it was not filled with luxury. We didn't live in a huge mansion, and we spent our summer days at the local public pool, not in an extravagant private oasis. We may not have flown by plane to such glamorous places, but every summer we enjoyed the sun and sand on our favorite beach. Dad drove a modest car and dressed strictly for work, although his suits were far from designer brands. My mother wore elegant jewelry that sparkled enough to attract attention, but didn't scream attention at her or make her a target. They just weren't attracted to extravagance. From the looks of it, they were really good people. They really were like that. Unfortunately, they died in a car accident when I was just beginning to master the twists and turns of student life. I feel the emptiness they left behind every day. She paused, her eyes lingering on me, and asked, "What happened next?" I moved in with my cousins. College continued, and that's where I met Anastasia. "So Anastasia didn't have a chance to meet your parents?" she asked, her curiosity obvious. "No, I didn't," I replied, "but she met my cousins." "Oh?" She leaned in, intrigued. "And how did it go?" "Well, let's just say the reception wasn't very warm. They didn't have any obvious dislike for her, but they didn't spread out a welcome mat either." My lawyer nodded understandingly, his gaze now focused on the unfolding story. "What are her loved ones like?" "Oh, they are very important, and they make sure that everyone knows about it. To them, I was just nobody, someone from the wrong side. They looked at me like I was some kind of trash from a trailer. By the way, what is your wife's maiden name?" "Capellini's," I replied. Her expression changed from surprise to a carefully crafted smile masking curiosity under the guise of professionalism. "Isn't her father Charlie Capellino?" I nodded slowly. "That's him." This name hung in the air like an unpronounceable weight. A business magnate, a titan of industry, a man caressed by wealth. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, frantically trying to connect the dots. "Does it say about your inheritance?" I hesitated, not knowing how to act on this delicate territory. "Well, that's not what I usually discuss. After the death of my parents, I became the sole heir. I wasn't ready to take over my father's empire, so I let his lawyer manage the sale of the company. All the proceeds were put into a trust that he created for me. I plan to use it when the time comes, but for now I'm just a teacher paving my own path." "Can you tell me how many are in the trust now?" "I think about 60 million. "And yet you are a teacher?" "Yes." I sensed her disbelief. I had already experienced a similar reaction. "I think this money is meant to support me while I'm doing a job that really brings me joy. It's not about messing around or spending money on extravagant yachts. The fact is that this money allows me to pursue my hobbies and look for an experience that brings me true satisfaction. In particular, teaching fills me with a deep sense of satisfaction." It wasn't so much a question as an affirming statement. "Yes, absolutely. I've had some amazing teachers throughout my life, and I see this as my way of paying tribute to their influence." The lawyer sat quietly in her chair, her gaze thoughtful, as if she was assessing the nuances of my situation. I couldn't help but wonder, does Anastasia know about the trust? "She is aware that it is available, but I am not sure that I have ever disclosed the details. She's always been adamant about keeping our finances separate, and we file our tax returns independently each year, so she had no reason to peek at the numbers." "So, from her point of view, you're just a teacher with a modest inheritance. Is that so?" I hadn't thought about it until now, but it seems to be true. "I advise you to sign it today before she changes her mind." Her words sounded like a punch to the gut, and I was blown away for a moment. To be honest, let me explain everything. At its core, the law revolves around one thing: money. Of course, there are emotional considerations when it comes to children, but in the absence of toddlers, financial influence decides everything. Take, for example, your father-in-law, Charlie Capellino. He happened to build a complex facade, a house of cards standing on the edge, and only a whisper of wind can bring it down. My relatives would call it all in a hat, but without cattle. A lot of shows without substance. As I have already guessed, he squeezes the maximum out of every dollar. The actual question is simple. Are you willing to pay the price for this? This is a provocative thought that made me think about how her family treated me and how she communicated with me in their presence. That was the first blow. It always seemed to me that she was obsessed with wealth, fiercely protective of her trust fund, which bordered on paranoia. It was the second blow. Then a custom-made suit appeared, in which she left, leaving me with a feeling of emptiness, and that was the third blow. At that moment, I made a decision and shook my head decisively. "No." "Then I ask you to sign this agreement. If you want, I can dig into your trust, but if she leaves it to you, then it's wiser to keep what belongs to you. Let her take her share and move on." I took a deep breath and then let it all out. She was right. I had to admit the truth. My marriage was a failure, and it was time to admit it. Calling her secretary into the office, she told her to bring the notary's seal. I signed the document. The lawyer witnessed this, and the secretary took care of the notarization. Later today, I will hand over the papers to her lawyer and close this chapter once and for all. Her lawyer was an impressive, real ace in the courtroom. This case was dragged out like a drum, and there was no way she could come back and claim at least some part of your trust. I must have looked puzzled, because she took a moment to explain. Carl, her life is all smoke and mirrors. If her father's empire collapses, her whole world will go off the axis and it will be ugly. You have to step back before the storm breaks. I've never met your wife, but she seemed to me to be someone who thrives on manipulation, and you definitely don't want to become her next victim. I nodded, taking in her words. She was right. The lesson was not easy for me, but nevertheless, I learned it. Visit your cousins. A short distance will help you look at the situation in a new way. She was right. Anastasia left me on the last day of class, and I went out into the summer sun, feeling the full weight of what was happening. I made the decision to use my money. I used these funds to cover my summer expenses and went to the farm to help my relatives. I needed a distraction, and they needed support. It was like coming home, and that summer everything fell into place, except for one thing: my future ex-wife. I had always been only an accomplice to her grandiose story, but now I was free to rewrite my own story. The pieces of my life finally fell into place, and for the first time I was able to see the possibilities opening up in front of me. As soon as I crossed the threshold of my apartment, a wave of nostalgia hit me, and I returned to the city just a week before the start of the school year. My divorce was finally over, but Anastasia's life was a closed book to me, and to be honest, I didn't want to read it. A year and a half later, a whisper of change reached me. Anastasia's father's business collapsed in an unstable economy. It was just a small ripple in the vast ocean of financial turmoil, but it swept around the world. The banks, in their relentless pursuit of profit, lent him money that he could not repay, which led to the flow of debts spiraling out of control. In the end, he was forced to sell his company, keeping the house and most of his cherished possessions, but it was a bitter pill that had to be swallowed. Although many of his employees managed to keep their jobs, the company's management faced the harsh reality of layoffs. Among the victims was Ashley, the man for whom Anastasia left me. It was a tragic saga, but strangely enough, it did not touch my heartstrings. My lawyer's only miscalculation was that Anastasia would come back looking for another chance to get what she thought was rightfully hers. I couldn't help but imagine her father desperately trying to save his fortune and maybe even looking greedily at her trust fund. But no matter how vile their antics were, I doubted he would stoop that low. Anastasia, blissfully unaware, probably never realized that my own trust had a certain value, and I wasn't going to enlighten her. Whenever Anastasia and our marriage slip through my mind, and such moments don't happen often, I can't help but think about how things might have turned out differently if she and her family hadn't treated me with such contempt. She never understood that life goes beyond simple wealth. The true essence of money lies in its ability to enrich our experience and connect us to what is really important. Fixated on preserving her wealth and protecting it from me, she did not notice the wealth of life that I had to offer. But, as they say, it's all water under the bridge. Life goes on, and for me at least, it's going well. As I thought, when Anastasia heard rumors that I had bought an expensive car, she started sniffing out where I got such money. Somehow she became aware of the trust and that it was huge. Anastasia was born, and I was born, and at least he became good for me, but not for Anastasia. When she begged for a second chance, I just laughed and slammed the door in her face. "Goodbye, Anastasia," I shouted after her. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.